the American president, who made a speech to a large audience, and that's why this is important. And it was the first time that an American president to a large audience talked about underdeveloped countries. The word underdeveloped was used really for the first time in an important speech. Not that underdevelopment didn't exist before, but it became also a category. And also, he talked about the necessity to help underdeveloped countries, which he called peaceful countries, and peaceful in 1949 means non-communist, of course. So you see that in this discourse there is a context, and it's not just something said like that, although this, in this discourse, and this is especially the point 4 of this discourse that I'm talking about, this point 4 was added 2 or 3 days before his discourse. The discourse of 1949 was about international stability, was about NATO, was about the reconstruction of Europe, because it was just after the World War II. But this point 4 was focusing on developing countries, was completely new in the international discourse. So let's say that the scholars and the specialists think that the beginning of the era of development is 1949, symbolically, of course. As they think also that the beginning of the era of globalization is 1980s. What we can say of what happened after 1949 is that if we look at what is done in development, and if we look at the change in definition of the development, we will see that development from 1950 to today has been more defined, taking into account what happened in the north or in the west, depending on how you want to call this the developed world, so was more linked to what happened in the developed world than in the developing world. Let me explain myself. For example, when in the 1950s the developed world was very optimistic about its situation, it defined developing the development as non-problematic, because that time was the time of the golden 60s. Everything seemed possible. In the 1970s, the stance got much more pessimistic because of the oil crisis and the evolution of the economic problems in the developed world. And then, at that time, development was defined differently, as the specialists focused on the basic needs and also began to talk about the poverty problem and the fight against poverty. Things change, and definition of development change. I will focus later on the theories, but in general, this is the way it went. In 1979, from 1979, development has been more defined in neoliberal terms, which means that the actors of development have changed. from 1979 on, the issue is who is going to do development. And we see that there's a change from the principal actor, the main actor, who was until 1979 considered to be the state, to the market. And not only the market, and we will see it tomorrow, the actors, the main actors of development are today considered to be the international institutions and also the NGOs and the private actors. From 1979 also on, there was some other factors that were introduced in the definition of development, and of course that they were international external factors like the end of the Cold War, and also the beginning of an official cooperation policy of EU. These were important changes in the conception and in the way development has been seen. From 2001, things also changed. Everyone knows the September 11, 2001, and from that time on, what has been also added to the definition of development is the issue of security, international security, and also the idea that the whole world is interlinked. And from 2000 until today, of course, what is important and what is the agenda, what is on international agenda is the Millennium Development Goals. Today also, what has been important in the way development is seen is that the people who work on development has to confront the failures that are there and have to manage with these failures. Just to summarize what I have said until now is that, in general, development has been defined by the developers. It's not really people in the developing countries that define what could be development. And this is important because it's sometimes more the problems of the developed world that are taken into account when we do development than what is really happening in the underdeveloped or developing world. This is, I think, an important lesson of what happened from 1950 until now. And why is it the case? It's because, well, and we can, of course, it's something that could be understood. The way we thought about development was in complete accordance to the way European and Western thinking was going on. I mean, in West, what was important, what has been important even before the 20th century, and I can say from 18th century on, is the issue of progress. Progress that could be possible in the 18th century, that was the real important thinking. Progress that could be possible because there was, the man has a reason. And if he is a being of reason, well, he could progress. He has to progress, and this is the way change has been taught from the 18th century to now. That means that all the developing theories that I will talk about in the next hours are theories from the West. There is not really a theory coming from developing countries. There are some think tanks in India, there are some experiences, but really all the theories are Western, be it socialist or non-socialist. It's really, development has been the problem of the West, of the developed countries more than others. So, having said that, how could we define development in order to go on? Well, that you will see that this definition is very difficult, because every theory defines underdevelopment and development in a different way. But all the theories are thinking the same about some ideas that are specially linked to European history. All the theories agree about some ideas that are ideas that began in the 18th century of Europe. For example, all the theories agree that development can't be done without industrialization. First idea. And of course, you can see that saying industrialization is leaning on European history. This is, of course, what happened in Europe. Economic progress was linked to industrialization. So this is also a model which was followed in the developing world. And industrialization is stressed by the Soviet model and by the American model as well. Another idea which is common to all the theories is the idea of progress. I just talked about it, so I won't say it again. Another idea which is common to all the theories is the place or the main role of nation and the states in the developing of underdeveloped countries. Another idea common to all of the theories is that in order to develop, societies should get more complex. For example, division of labor should be introduced. For example, also secularization should be introduced. So these are ideas common to all the theories. That doesn't mean that these theories look like like each other, but what it does mean is that all the theories have the same goal, have the same objective. The goal is that the developing countries reach the developed, and the developed model is the West. The only difference is that the way they will follow, the course they will follow will be different.